All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name's Leona, and on behalf of everyone at Better Read Than Dead, we are so excited to see you on Zoom tonight to celebrate Christine Jackman's latest novel, Turning Down the Noise, The Quiet Power of Silence in a Busy World. Christine is joined in conversation tonight by Lisa Forrest. Please note that tonight's event is being recorded, so if you would not like to be filmed, please turn off your camera settings. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. These will be different depending on where you're zooming in from. For me, it is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that Better Read Than Dead is built. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, to introduce our guests. We are joined tonight by Christine Jackman. Christine began her career as a journalist with the Courier Mail in Brisbane in 1993. She has worked in New York as a foreign correspondent for News Corp, in the Canberra Press Gallery, and as the social issues writer for The Australian. After several years as an award-winning staff writer for the Weekend Australian magazine, Christine embraced freelance journalism with features published in Good Weekend, Vogue, and The Australian Women's Weekly. She's also a communications consultant. Tonight, we celebrate Christine's newest offering, Turning Down the Noise, an exploration of the quest for clarity and peace of mind in a busy and noisy world. Christine is joined in conversation tonight by Lisa Forrest. Lisa is an Olympic and Commonwealth Games swimming champion, media host, actor, and author. She has written 3 children's books, the 2008 bestseller Boycott, and most recently this April, Glide, Taking the Panic Out of Modern Living. There will be a Q&A session towards the end, and if you have any questions for our guests, please type them into the group chat, and Christine and Lisa will answer them via video once the time comes. Without further ado, here's Lisa to kick things off.
Thank you, Leona. It's lovely to be here. Hi, everybody, and hello, Christine Jackman. How lovely to chat.
Hi, Lisa.
Finally.
Yes.
I've been enjoying your book.
Thank you.
So I thought we'd just sort of start with the fact that, we're in a really interesting time. The recent federal budget recognised that mental health problems are on the rise due to COVID-19. They have been, on the rise pre-pandemic, but what their response was to fund what is already being done. So rather than 10 visits to a psychologist, we can now have 20. Which is kind of interesting because where you and I sit, due to what we're writing and what we know through the science and through, what's going on, not much has changed in mental health in 30 years. And yet we know, and we're not the only book. You've written, of course, the wonderful Turning Down the Noise. I wrote Glide, Julia Baird wrote Phosphorescence, Shannon Harvey wrote My Year of Living Mindfully. We know personally and through the science the benefits of silence, benefits of nature, the benefits of awe. And so we're in this interesting place where we're in a kind of, I don't know, almost radical. Do you feel like a radical when it comes to bringing this into the world, turning down the noise into the world?
It's funny, isn't it? Because I don't know if I feel like a radical. Sometimes I feel like my former colleagues from News Corp are probably thinking, oh, she must have had some sort of weird, trippy, hippie breakdown thing. And yet, I mean, when I set out to write this book, I was very committed. It began with just an idea that I felt like my life had become very, very noisy, and I could almost not define what that was, except that I was constantly asking people to be more quiet. I was so hyperstimulated that even my children greeting me at the door at the end of, when I came home at the end of the day, it almost caused me a physical pain. I would wince. And I just didn't know what was going on. I look back and think, and as I write about it, there was just chronic hyperstimulation of digital and auditory noise. But when I decided that I wanted to write about that journey into trying to discover what the hell this was, and also asking those questions of, if it's about noise, are there ways of countering that impact? How do we turn it down? What can we do for it to make ourselves feel a bit more healthy? I was determined, I think it was because of my journalistic background. I thought, well, I don't want to just write a personal journey. That would have been fine. People have done that. I really felt like, as somebody who's written, for most of my career in that sort of non-fiction space, but also in that space of investigating things and talking to experts and things, I thought, I actually want to find out, is this just making me feel good because I'm strange, or because it's just, nice thing to do?
Or am I being self-indulgent? Which is
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what, Lisa, I so think that's an issue for women particularly. There's a whole little niche area that gets dismissed as, I don't know, oh, it's self-care, but it's not taken seriously. If you're a bloke and you're out burning off steam by going for a run or smashing things in a gym, and women do that too, don't get me. Yeah, that seems to be a little bit more acknowledged as a way to balance your life than actually what a lot of really busy women particularly, but busy people generally need to do, which is actually bring everything down, strip everything away. So yeah, and the science, as what we can talk about, the science is just amazingly leaping ahead. To go back to where mental health policy is in this country, I think the thing is, we always see a bit of a lag, don't we? And it's only really been in the last 10 to 20 years with things like fMRIs and EEG before that we could really start to delve into what's actually going on. That, when we say this makes me feel better.
Yeah. That's actually really happening. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's happening in the brain. You're not imagining it. Okay, beautiful. So I know, look, I thought when I wrote Glide, I was like, I am a little bit, I wouldn't say hippie, if you like, but I had experiences back as a teenager that allowed me, if you like, to go, okay, what is success? How am I going to live life? And so I took paths that made choices that were not necessarily, always the wisest, or at least people around me didn't think it was wise, but I was working stuff out. So when I came to this looking for what was going on, the trouble with my thinking, so my noise was internal, I was wondering how I was creating my stress due to, despite the fact I've chosen always to do what I love to do. Our book starts, in an absolutely kind of crazy place. Like, you're single mum of two, you've got 2 phones, you're the communications director for the Business Council of Australia, you've worked in News Corp. Like, as you say, the noise that is created by some of the people that you've worked for is not only it's tough, but also the story is, if you can't manage this, then you're just not tough enough. So, and it turned out to be your dad, just one sound of your dad's in pain who helps you rise above that noise and decide, okay, I've got to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you put it like that, Lisa, my entire career was crazy busy. I mean, news cycle, media and politics, right? You don't get any more frenetic, I don't think, unless you're working in emergency medicine or something. And yet, firstly, I'd make the point, a lot of it is manufactured, and we're seeing that now. Once you're on that cycle, it's easy to feel like, I say stopping is, it almost feels like stopping so unfamiliar that you stay on it, right? And you see that now with I think the political and the media cycle anyway, but we can get back to that. In terms of where I was at, and I should just, in deference to my dear partner, I was by this stage with my partner, Peter, but I'd been a single mum for several years before then. By the time we were in Sydney, living on the harbour, the 2 phones, I like to say that gets a big head nod from people, right? You've really made it when you got the 2 phones. You see those people sitting up the pointy end of the plane. The guys at Sydney Airport back then, like, they knew me at the special entrance where you go in because you're special, because you fly all the time. They actually knew me by name because I flew almost every week. And I had, I think, with my children, with everything, you move into this realm, and it's encouraged, I think, in the modern world, to think that everything's doable. You just have to have the right to-do list. It's all, you just got to be busy, busy, busy. And, you know, the method for the measure of success is how many things can you manage at once? So how many times do we hear people say, you know, you say, how are you? Oh, I'm busy. Oh, I'm busy. You know, and so for me, if anything happened, like managing my kids, and I feel in retrospect, you know, some sadness about this, but it came partly from being a single mum, but managing my children had become, you know, like a spreadsheet rather than human engagement, because I was constantly moving between things. And managing my work was like that. So when Dad became ill, he'd had a stroke. And then one day in Brisbane, he had a fall. And as it turned out, coincidentally, I was on a plane up to Brisbane because my boss was, we'd set up a meeting with Pauline Hanson. I mean, part of the job was often meeting different politicians about different issues. So I'm meeting Pauline Hanson, taken a long time to set that meeting up. And Dad had a fall, and I literally got that call, both of my phones going off as I went to the airport. By the time I got on the plane, I'd organised it all, because I just went into, this is fixable. This is all, it's fine. Now, is it a hospital up here, big hospital, and I had to move him to another hospital because they couldn't operate on him at the hospital. And again, I remember just thinking, that's all doable. Got 2 phones, got an EA, just have to sort this out. And I can make it to the meeting, that Hanson meeting, just have to do this, this, this. And I remember as they lifted Dad, and this is, I don't want to upset anyone, but as they lifted Dad, because he had a very badly broken thigh bone. And he was 78, I think, when that happened. As they lifted him into the ambulance, you know, my dad screamed because of the pain. And I remember sitting in that ambulance as they moved him, and just because partly, thank God I had enough, I don't know, acuity to think I won't actually be on the phones in the ambulance. This is it. But I think that scream just shocked through to the core of who I am as a human being, as a daughter. And I just suddenly thought, if I can say it now, I don't think I had the words, but if I am not present, this is bad. I could lose my father at this point. If I'm not present in this moment, all of the fixing, that's not gonna help for the relationship. As I said, I don't think I could have articulated it, but that's where things started to tick over in my brain, that I needed to change some things. I needed to get quieter and get more present. By way of an aside, we had lost, about a few weeks before that, we had lost our good friend Mark Colvin, the host of PM, ABC's PM. And he'd been a great friend, and he had become ill, and Mark had had several illnesses, but he became in the end ill very quickly. And I thank Mark in my head and my heart regularly, because we were with him on the morning he died. And that was the morning, and then I rushed back to work. And I remember thinking, I think that alerted me to the fact that this life we've got, things change suddenly. And, if we're running around with a to-do list and 2 phones, is that we're going to miss stuff that's really important. And losing Mark, I really think had opened enough of me up to that when I saw what was happening with Dad, I just thought, hang on, I need to change things.
It's such a beautiful chapter, that opening chapter. I mean, you called it rush, but it could be noise, just that the way that you set us up so beautifully with all of the noises, and we can't talk about everything, but for readers, like, go and just your observation about working in McDonald's as a kid.
1980s McDonald's, oh yeah.
But so, as you say, you knew something had to change, but you didn't know what, except you knew that I wanted to stop talking. And what was incredible then is you went to Gwingana, is it, yes, on the Gold Coast, and you chose not to speak when other people would be speaking. I went to a silent retreat when everyone was sort of silent, but that must have been it was weird for you, but obviously you then found the joy of the beauty of being alive.
Yeah, I thought it was weird, but actually I was back at Gwingana only a few weeks ago, because there's a chapter in there that talks about being up there, and they wanted me to speak to some guests. And I thought it was weird, but they actually told me it's quite common that they get guests who are so depleted, they can barely move, let alone speak. You know, they are just at what's, you know, adrenal fatigue and adrenal exhaustion. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, I'm just talked out. I didn't really know anything more than that. And I said to them, I'm happy to do activities. I'd been at a yoga retreat in India where there were other people doing silent retreats. So I was aware of the thing. But I said, you know, I'm happy to do activities. I'm happy to have people talk to me. I'm happy to carry a notebook and answer. But I'm done with the talking. No more words left, which was kind of awkward because I was a communications consultant. But as a result, I think two very big breakthrough things happened, because in a way that this book was born there. It was, if nothing had happened, I don't think there would have been a book. The first one was removing enough stimulation, because it's up in Tamborine, you know, beautiful area of the Gold Coast hinterland. So it's just very natural, very quiet. You see lots of, you know, native animals, and stripping away all the, you know, all of the other noise. I started slowly to I remember standing after 4 days, just at the top of the valley that looks out to the Pacific Ocean, and just being sort of bathed, the way I remember it, bathed in sunshine, and just feeling healthy. And smelling that really clean air, and hearing, you know, bird calls and things, and just feeling wind on my face, and just thinking, I don't know what this is, but I want more of it. So that was the first thing. And the second observation, which was less calming but very, very interesting, and that I knew I wanted to explore, was that when you take down the auditory noise in your life, the stuff you can actually hear, the voices in your head, the noise in your head ratchets up. And that was in some ways a perfect place to be, because I was acutely aware of being the odd one out. If I'd been I've since been on silent retreats where everybody's silent, and they have their challenges, right? But being in the only silent person, it just so many insecurities, all the voices in my head. Oh, everyone thinks you're an idiot. Everyone thinks you're weird. Everyone thinks, and also the ego that we bring to the table, where we were literally sitting at, you know, the common dining tables, and it made me, I had to sit and watch myself thinking, people would be talking about something, maybe politics. I was a former political journalist, and I'd be sitting there going, no, I know that stuff. I know that. I need to. And I had to actually, even in that time, sit back and go, why do you need to? Why do you need to share your opinion? Why do you need people to know? And is that the only thing about you? Why is that the calling card about who Christine Jackman is? So while that was confronting, that noise in the head stuff, it was also interesting enough that I thought, oh, there's something juicy in this. Yeah.
We'll get to with our beautiful down in Melbourne. But I did love that beautiful quote. I think, was it the woman who ran Gwingana, who sent you the email that said, silence is the gift you've had all your life that you finally opened.
Yeah. Yes. And isn't that to the Sharon Kolker, who was the original manager up there? She's just stepped back, although she's still working part-time there. And I remember thinking, again, it was a beautiful thing for her to say, because she got me, you know. And I think all of us, Lisa, I've had so many people since this book's come out sort of sidle up or say something like, oh, I thought this was just me, or, you know, I've just been really struggling with this. And I think we are, in my firm belief, is we're told constantly, that we have to keep going, that there is something wrong with us if we can't keep up with the pace. And as I talk about in the book early on, when I had that big job, the capital B, capital J, the big job, I was sick all the time. I had chronic insomnia. It's like low-grade sinus infections. You're really irritable, as I said. All of the signs that naturopaths would say is adrenal fatigue, right? Where you're just constantly in stress all the time and your body's just depleted. But interestingly, if you go to a doctor, and I had all sorts of tests because I felt so unwell. All the blood tests, scans, sleep tests. And I remember my GP, and she was a good GP. She was really lovely. But she said to me, good news, you're healthy. Yeah?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it didn't feel like good news because I felt really unhealthy. And the penny dropped around that time because she said to me, I get a lot of patients like you. And this was, I think, Mossman Family Clinic around that area. She said, I got a lot of patients like you. They're mostly lawyers or in business. And that's where the penny started to drop. I thought, what if it's not that we're unhealthy? What if we're having a very healthy reaction to an unhealthy world, an unhealthy lifestyle? Our bodies are actually saying, can't do this much longer. This is really crazy. I'm going to make you stop.
I've also put down that great quote, which I think is that, along the lines of, we keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And your naturopath said to you, Christine, you can swallow all the herbs and green smoothies you want, but your body won't know what to do with them while you're stressed. And so
yeah,
something that we can keep creating through our thinking.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm a really big advocate now for sleep being the number one priority. It's like the canary in the coal mine for a lot of people. If your sleep's if you're not getting enough or the sleep quality is bad, that is in many ways, the body's one of the first ways to tell you something's not right. And we're only just starting to get this idea, the medical understanding that sleep's actually really important. It's not just, rest. Your body's doing and your brain's doing all sorts of really important stuff. And again, remember, how long has modern media, modern politics, modern business, how they almost venerate those people who can only sleep for 4 hours a night.
Yeah, that's right. Now we are going to introduce questions from our listeners or from our audience tonight. So we will get to your questions around about 7:15. But I just wanted to remind you that they're there. Should anything pop up that Christine says, you might like to quickly pop in the chat area. So I wanted to just because you went to then New Camaldoli in Big Sur. Is that how you can't?
I never worked out. I've heard people call it New Camaldi. There's an extra syllable in there, but anyway.
Camaldoli, yeah, but anyway.
Camaldoli in Big Sur, yeah.
Gorgeous, amazing. And then what was interesting is you picked up a book by Michael Casey, Monk of Tarawara, where you come across this word, right? And of course, as a teacher of this word, it's interesting. But as you say, you discover that mindfulness is not just the buzzword of the current zeitgeist, that in fact, it's been around for a long time, not just in Buddhism, but in a whole lot of areas. And then the book that you were reading, you'd gone all the way to Big Sur and found that actually Tarawara was in Victoria. So
yeah.
To meet him.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm not going to complain that I got to go to Big Sur. I mean, it's a stunning part of the world, and these monks live in this hermitage up on the cliffs of Big Sur, which is, you drive down from San Francisco along the coast there. It's just gorgeous and remote. And the highway had actually been periodically washed away. So it actually closed just after the hermitage. So there was no through traffic. And I remember sitting on the cliffs thinking, okay, kind of getting it. It's nice. It's quiet. And the monks seem pretty chill. Life's good. It's beautiful. But I was trying to really get deeper. And so I was reading, I think it's called Strangers in the City, as the sun is going down over the Pacific, which doesn't happen on the east coast of Australia. And it was just stunning. And reading this book about, how we're in our heads and everything, and thought, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And yes, sure enough, I could have flown to an hour to Melbourne. And Michael Casey is Father Michael Casey is one of the leading thinkers and writers about the Benedictine philosophy, which is what that strand of contemplative tradition in the Christian church is.
And so it was related that mindful, he related mindful attention and to its relationship to control freaks, which
I can't remember the quote. If you've got it there, by all means, read it.
It was only a little bit. I could go.
Yes.
I only just kind of made notes of it here, but it was relationship to control freaks, and you were like, oh my goodness, that ability to control, that it is that need to control that causes me more stress.
Oh yes. And also what I learned is that when I met Father Michael at Tarawara much later, when I got down there, he famously, as it's in the book now, said to me, with all respect, you need to cut off your head.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, okay, can you just tell me what I need to read and what I need to understand? And again, I think we're very much encouraged to be in our heads. You know, we've lost contact in many ways with the physical environment, and more on a screen all the time. And for somebody like me, yes, yeah. And for someone like me, and a lot of, I think, particularly women who are multitasking, you know, everything's up here, you know, and I just, again, it was part of my perfectionist tendency of, if I just think this through. And what he introduced me to is that stop thinking about it and start just experiencing it.
Feeling it. He said, that's what he said. It's a feeling.
Yeah. Now, we had a very interesting discussion about whether that's prayer or meditation or what do you call it. And one of the things I would say is that the more you delve into this contemplative philosophy, whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Indigenous, ultimately the man-made rules around it fall away. And you find that the people in these various traditions aren't that hung up about it. You find that often, you know, the great Benedictine monks, people like Thomas Merton, they become very interested in the Eastern spiritualities. There's a lot of crossover, because what you're doing is really just getting back to the essence. And in the essence of whatever it is you're communing with, you can call it moksha, enlightenment, the stream, bliss. It's just presence. It's presence. And but to experience that, you can't do it in your head. You can get there through breath, which is what lots of people use in terms of meditation and other things. You can get there in nature by stripping away other things. But you can't think your way to. I make the comparison. It's a bit like I could read lots of books about how to ride a bike, but that experience of being on the bike and feeling what it's like when you're actually riding a bike, no book can explain that to you. And that's, I think, I mean, as you know, with mindfulness meditation, it's the same thing. I think it's not something that you can think your way into.
No. Well, and there's a chapter in Glide that's called "You Can't Think Your Way Out of Because of course the trick becomes, as you found as you were going along, is that yes, we can be in nature, but and it's nice to feel, you know, some of the
yes.
When you've got emotions and that anxiety, you're missing out. That's all stuff arising within. So unless I'm actually present to it, I can't settle it. I might be going to do a million things to try to avoid what I'm actually feeling.
Yeah, and it's a really key recognition. It was for me that you can be in the quietest. I think after I went to Big Sur, I started realizing this. You can be in the quietest place in the world. I had become so obsessed about quiet that I had a decibel meter in my phone just to see where was the quietest place I could sit. And you could go to live in a cave, as Tenzin Palmo did, the Buddhist nun. You can live in the desert. You can live in, but ultimately we take a lot of noise with us. And if you think about it, you could sit in a church, for example. If you were scrolling through your phone, even if it was on silent, you're not going to be quiet. And, you know, very humbling, you know, here I am thinking that I was having some really big thoughts here, but you go back, this stuff's been grappled with for centuries. I mean, the story I like to tell is, you know, back in the day when, you know, ancient Rome was the place to be, you know, the wine women's song, everything's going on in ancient Rome. It's the center of the world. And at that point, about four centuries AD, you know, these early Christian monks or early Christians decided this is not the place to connect with something higher. So they leave for the desert, and they became known as the desert fathers and mothers. And very soon afterwards, they start writing. I had the quote somewhere, but I'm not going to be able to find it now. But they start writing about not just quieting everything around you, but quietening your heart, quietening your mind. And there's St. Benedict went on to say, listen with the ear of your heart. So start listening. And I think, you know, and there's lots of stuff in those early contemplative traditions about battling with demons in the desert or in the forest, you know, because, and what that they're talking about there is, again, the mess we can make in our own head if we don't address that stuff.
And as you said, I think we both used the same study from the University of Virginia, where they found that people would rather give themselves mild electric shocks and sit for 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, an electric shock that, for people who don't know the study, so University of Virginia and Harvard, beforehand, people were given this shock. They were volunteers, and they said, you know, I'd pay to never have that again. That sucked. And then they get put in an empty room by themselves with that and the shock machine. And 2/3 of men and 1/4 of women actually shocked themselves because that was more interesting than being by themselves or something. I don't know. I by the way, there's a whole other conversation in why so many more men than women did it. And my theory, all of them were mothers, and they were like, it's an empty room by myself. Bring it on, sister. Yeah.
Tell us about, though, you finally go for your 10-day Vipassana, you know, meditation retreat in total silence, and you run into a bushfire.
Yes. So finally, after doing a couple of other shorter meditations, very important for people to be aware that I'm not saying, hey, jump into a 10-day retreat. You may never do a 10-day retreat in silence, and you don't have to. I don't want people to feel pressured. But I'd worked my way up, and we went to Tasmania because that was, I didn't want to do it up here in Queensland summer. There's a Vipassana retreat centre up here as well. So we went to Tasmania, and so many things about that. You know, you give away everything, just so that for people listening, you give away your books, which killed me. You give away writing materials. I sneakily took a few notes because I was writing about it. It's not just silence, it's no eye contact, because it's very, as you know, we communicate so much with our eyes and our face. It's very challenging, but and the first, I don't know, day 3 and 4, I think, are notoriously the worst.
10 days, so you're
haven't you? Yeah. So the body goes into, I'm hating this. There's, you know, people, some people leave. They're very carefully screened, because you shouldn't do it if you are, if you like have deep, some serious mental health issues, because, you know, things will come up. PTSD, not great for that. But on the whole, you know, it's totally safe. People crying, it was a bit intense. In this beautiful setting, you know, wallabies outside, bushland setting. I saw an echidna for the first time live, and you're not allowed to do any exercise. You can walk, but no running or yoga or anything else. And on the 8th day, I think it was the 8th day, I thought, I've got this now. I'm actually beginning to really get in my zone. And that morning we went into the hall. They ring a gong at 4 a.m. and you certainly are expected to be in the hall. If not at 4, then at 6. Beautiful day. It was dawn coming, and they said at the end of our first session, because you normally do 2 hours of meditation at a time, that there were serious bushfires, very bad bushfires in Tasmania that year. And they said, it's likely to come this way. We have to be evacuated. It's okay. We found a church hall in a country town about 45 minutes away by bus. You have to do it all in silence. And at that point, I was partly thinking, is this some sort of weird Vipassana test? But no, sure enough, by the time we got there, we were in this church hall in the middle of nowhere. And it was, I mean, I covered a couple of bad bushfires as a journalist, and, you know, when the air turns red and you feel that furnace wind that you know is coming out of a blaze. It was like that for most of the day. And I can only say that, yeah, again, humbling moment, because I thought I was pretty good at this, but I'll happily put my hand up and confess, I invested most of my time that day in planning my escape. I was so out of there. Because I wasn't sure. And again, this is the head messing with you, right? The need for control over everything, that I need to know exactly. And of course, we don't have any control, but I thought, they're not telling us if we're going to stay here the night. Do we have to stay here the night? If we stay the night, will they give us something to sleep on? Can we go to a hotel? And I got myself so worked up. I was like, okay, I'm just leaving. No, bear in mind, nothing. I had no wallet, no phone, nothing. I'm going to go over that fence during the break, and I can see a church up the road. I think that's a Catholic church. So there'll be a priest there, and I'm going to ask to use a phone. And I'll be honest, my partner Peter was there, although you get segregated, and I just thought, nah, he's on his own. Leave him. He can take care of himself. He'll find me back in Hobart. I had no idea where I was, so I don't know how.
It's all going on in your mind.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Did you
exactly.
remember to come back to the breath or whatever you were supposed to do?
I tried, Lisa. Well, look, I didn't leave, so I must have done something right. But isn't that a great example? It's just, we do it to ourselves so often about things that are either past, you know, ruminating over past hurts, or future, worrying about what may happen. And in the meantime, you know, what's going on, you know, we're not aware of, or we're not there. And that's what, you know, the Buddhists, for example, would call that suffering as opposed to pain. You know, suffering is the story we attach to what's going on. And Vipassana teaches you to be very aware of what's going on without attaching. And that's actually, you know, because we do it all the time. I like to see, for people who haven't done that sort of thing, I like Tim Ferriss of the 4-Hour Work Week and the wonderful podcast that he does. He describes it as, you know, if you've got a front-loading washing machine, and you can see if you've got a cat, they might like watching it go round and round. And he said, you know, your thoughts are like that, and when you can be in there with them. And he said, all that Vipassana taught me was, or meditation generally, is to move 6 inches to the other side. So the thoughts, you can still see that there's a tumble going around, but you're not being tumbled around with it. Yeah. And I just made it sound so simple, didn't I?
Well, yeah, I think Joseph Goldstein is simple but not easy.
Yes.
So, look, there's so much in the book, and I'm just going to encourage everyone to, if you've got questions, maybe you want to know how you can fit silence into your life. Like there's some beautiful tips that Christine's written in the back. Like there's a whole section about how to bring silence into your life. So if you want to ask any questions about that, then please do. I've still got more, of course, that I can ask you, but we can go into it. Let's just talk about what all this noise is doing to our health. Because you've done a lot of research into that. I mean, we've got The Social Dilemma on Netflix. I was thinking about, you know, your book has a beautiful chapter on all of that, what all that social media is doing to our brains, what the noise does. So, you know, well, we could be here all night talking about it, but, you know, the main thing.
I must admit, I almost don't want to share the amazing Tristan Harris with the world, because I had been captured by him here, having heard an interview a few years ago. And I do see him as a sort of a real prophet in this area, and I encourage anybody to watch that.
Well, I think it was Sam Harris who I first listened to.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
And I had a teenage son, so I was trying to work out how to manage this, you know, this
that
was out there.
Yeah.
He was on Q&A this week, and he's
everywhere. So yeah, no, I mean, there's a couple of things. The one way I like to conceptualize it for people in terms of both digital and auditory noise is that if you think about it, you know, I think human beings have been on Earth probably originally in Africa 5 to 7 million years ago. Okay. Most of that time until the Industrial Revolution, we have been mainly living in a world of, you know, basic built structures. More recently, no electric light. And then the Industrial Revolution comes along, as I said, 250 or so years ago, and things start getting noisier. So, you know, you start seeing big concerns about noise. Although even before then, the laws of London in, I think it was 1595, the laws spelled LAWES, decreed that, you know, after 9 p.m. men could not sing. Yes. And also you couldn't beat your servant or your wife, because that's that noise. Now, as I make a point in the book, it's a bit of a shame that domestic violence laws took a few more centuries to sort of come past. But, you know, so there was obviously, and Julius Caesar banned wagons from the streets in Rome back in the day. So people have been aware of noise. But the big difference in terms of our health, really, when you think about how we evolve, about how human evolution evolves, it happens slowly. It does not happen like that. So relatively recently, we moved into built structures like the ones we're sitting in with electric lights, which means we can stay up after sundown and things like that. Our bodies are still probably, you know, our bodies don't like being out of a circadian rhythm, as you know, sort of, we don't like working at night, sleeping during the day, but we've had a bit of time to connect with that. And then in the last, you know, only in our generation have we had this thing called the internet, which is on all the time, and suddenly means that there is an endless, you know, not just rabbit warren of stuff that for entertainment or information to suck you in. And then only since 2007, you know, this baby got held up by Steve Jobs, the smart device. Now that's really important to recognize, because suddenly digital noise, the ability to shove stuff in there, because people sort of say we've always had, and we had TV, we had radio, but the difference is that it's infinite noise. It's not just Saturday morning cartoons that finished at midday. Tough luck, then you've got nothing. You've got to go out and do something in the backyard. It's infinite. It's all day, all night. And it's, as Tristan Harris talks about, designed to match with algorithms what's most likely to keep your attention in there. Now, you think about that. Think about a human brain trying to adapt with that level of what we're telling it is a constant state of fight or flight. You know, you're constantly alert. So I go into both the negative impacts of auditory noise and digital noise. In terms of auditory noise, there hasn't been as much work done in Australia, but certainly there have been scientific studies that show that, you know, for example, even if you think you sleep well, your ears are primed to be, there's a reason you don't have earlids.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I had not thought of that until
yeah.
in your book. Yeah, we've got eyelids to shut our eyes. Our ears are always open.
Yeah, they are the sentinel. That's what they were throughout evolution, right? And so,
danger.
Yeah. And so a fellow called Buxton, also at Harvard, did a seminal study with hospital patients, monitoring how people responded if there was, you know, doors closing or phones going off or human. And sure enough, even people who reported, I slept fine, slept well, no dramas, the heart rate and the neural activity spiked out of its where it need, you know, out of healthy place to be, because somewhere you are acknowledging there's something going on. So if you are exposed to traffic noise all the time, if you're exposed to certain levels beyond a comfortable level, and it doesn't have to be very loud, in a normal work environment, noise that's beyond a normal human conversation starts to have health impacts if it's sustained for 8 hours. Mainly the best research I found on this was with the World Health Organization and the EU. The EU, I think, found that there was something like 43,000 premature deaths, I think it was. 43,000 hospital admissions and roughly 10,000 premature deaths caused by exposure to noise. And when they mean noise, I don't mean industrial noise. They screened out for that sort of workplace stuff, but just traffic noise, you know, construction sites, those sorts of things. so we know that our health, and it's mainly seen in things like blood pressure, heart rate. You start to see immune function getting compromised. Digital noise does different things because it breaks down, you know, our ability to focus, our ability to concentrate. The fact that we know, for example, that this is a peer-reviewed study too, I think about 5 years ago, just turning your phone off and putting it next to you, you know, you still have a brain drain, an attentional drain. We have limited capacity for attention. Stanford University in about 2009 found that the idea of multitasking is a myth. You can't do it. So what you're doing when you're having these multiple inputs, if you see kids these days with the phone and the screen that they're watching something, and you know, the more you do that, the more you are, you know, draining your brain. You're draining, and it shows up in effects like, you know, poor attention, inability to focus, often things like frayed, you know, empathy, you know, you get, and then you start to see the health. You see that flow through to what it's saying, because you're stimulating your brain constantly. So your brain thinks, I need to be alert. You then start having those stress hormones, the cortisol hormone, things like that, which put your body into
stress response.
Yeah.
You can't sleep at night.
Yes. And, you know, is it, you know, we are seeing this. We're seeing the spikes of anxiety. We're seeing this and antidepressant pharmaceutical prescriptions going up. We're seeing, you know, reported rates of insomnia going up. We're seeing anger, you know, outrage. And I think, yeah, the constant digital noise, when you think about that poor brain that's really not capable, it's not designed to be doing that. There's a reason we're supposed to replenish with sleep, all those sorts of things. And we're asking it. I mean, the head of Netflix on the record famously said, and Reed Hastings said, you know, our competition now isn't, you know, Stan or anything. Our competition now is sleep.
Yeah.
So these guys are deliberately,
yeah,
you know.
Exactly.
Nice. Or YouTube, another one, then I'll stop. I mean, YouTube famously said, you know, there's about, I think it's 1 billion, this statistic will be a bit older now, but 1 billion hours roughly watched a day on YouTube. And 70 million hours of that is stuff that's been suggested. So you've gone to YouTube, if you're into YouTube, to go, and then the algorithm will suggest, hey, why don't you watch this kitten video or this conspiracy theory about something? So 70 million hours is that stuff. So that's the power of the algorithm. Yeah, so we're feeding a lot. I compare it to the sort of the junk food analogy, because I think it's really important, and it's why I included my silence tips in the back. I'm not of the extremist. Think it's very important not to go down the, you know, I have to be doing a 10-day retreat and I have to meditate 2 hours a day. I think
recovering perfectionist, which is
yeah,
that's sort of
and you see that, right? Don't you? I mean, you see people who are like, it's not good enough to just run around the block if you're into running. You now have to be training for a triathlon or a marathon or whatever. We are constantly pushed to do more.
I mean, I've talked to people who organise, you know, 50K walks, and the organiser said, oh no, we find women don't actually, you know, sort of decide to do something like that unless it's extreme. Oh my God, we're working full time, we're running households.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and yeah, so I was very determined to say this is not something that most of us aren't going to suddenly be able to do the complete. No. You know, I had occasionally fantasized about suddenly becoming a Buddhist nun, but I have 2 children who probably would have taken issue with that, and a partner. So it's really about, in some ways, it's about recognizing that we now have the science to say that there are things you can do in nature or in meditation. There are various things that are really good to counter the stuff we can't control, but also to treat particularly our digital noise like we learnt only in the last sort of couple of decades, like diet. Yeah. You know, a little bit is okay, but what are you actually doing? Are you only having that little bit? I think the anxiety levels we're seeing with elections, with the Trump election, the presidential election particularly, is a really good example of that. There'll be people out there who, or with COVID, who were like constantly on Twitter. But you've got, I think there's a mindfulness that you can use there about, well, what am I actually going to learn about this if I look at Twitter 7 times in the next hour? You know,
all got friends, I think, that are in that place.
Yeah.
Completely absorbed. And I often say, look, I'm old enough to remember when there was the morning news bulletin on ABC, 7:45 to 8, and then we watched the nighttime news at
Yes.
6, 7 o'clock. Like, we didn't actually worry about it in the middle. So maybe think about it like that, like check in the morning, check in the afternoon.
Yes.
So it's a...
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a recovering news junkie, right? And I fell off the wagon. I mean, at the beginning of COVID, like a lot of people, I got back on Twitter and I started looking, and I noticed my anxiety spike. And what I did then was actually think, because I encourage people to think it's not just about meditation. I did what a lot of people did in the end. I thought, get out into the sunshine, letterbox, do something that you can control, or that you can make a connection and make a contribution. And as it turned out, I actually went in-house for a little while because I'm a communications consultant on the side. I went in-house with a hospital up here that was doing some big COVID research. And as I've said to people since, particularly journos who are very addicted to Twitter, I said, having spent 4 months in that environment of research, COVID's not going to be solved by anyone tweeting. It's not going to be solved by politicians or the media on Twitter. It's going to be solved by scientists in laboratories doing slow, quiet work. And I think that says it all, really. The rest of it's noise.
We're going to run out of time.
Yes.
Questions, but do you want to give us a couple of, you've got a silence how-to guide. And so what are a couple of, quick tips for people who are looking for silence?
Okay, so I divided it into slivers, slices, and slabs of silence, because I knew that some people, a slab would be a retreat, 12 days or 3 days, 10 days, whatever you wanted to do. But for most people day to day, who say, well, I can't do that and everything, a sliver would be just something that you can grab a minute, 2 minutes, you're in the lift, you're at your desk. And I mean, one of them, they're drawn from different things, but a sliver might be, there's a lovely thing called a half moon meditation, except I'm not going to demonstrate it because you look weird. But your half moon is your smile, which replaces, so you smile. You can do this in the car at a traffic light. You can just fix on, watch the light. Half smile, which releases all those nice happy hormones. And 3 breaths right down into your belly. Simple as that. That's not even 30 seconds, I don't think. It depends on how fast you breathe. So, you can do that and it has a benefit. Wonderful things about, a slice of silence. Walk the dog if you have a dog, or walk by yourself, but in nature, find a track, whatever, get in amongst trees, because there's a whole chapter on the benefits of doing that. But don't take earphones. And now that's the big thing. Like, so many people have gone, oh, hang on, that's what I do. I do it, right? Or if you really want to experiment, do half with earphones and half without, and just watch. And if you have to, just go, I found myself doing things like the sky's there's this many clouds. The wind is coming from this direction. Just get back into your senses. Lunchtime at work, I called it, I think because I'm a journalist and we like, to do things with multiple, I can't remember what it's called, but the quiet quest, like that. Yes. I know I used to go out of the office, go to the food court across the road, bring the food back, sit at my desk, right? Or maybe sit in a noisy food court. And I once a week, maybe give yourself set yourself the challenge of finding a quiet space in the city. Because they're amazing. It is amazing what you will find, art galleries and the State Library up here in Brisbane, full of sunshine and light and air. And there are these little nooks and crannies where you can sit and just be. You can eat your lunch, sit on the grass, find a grassy space, or sit in. I got to tell you, find a church. Doesn't matter if you're religious or not. They're quiet, quiet and cool, and just sit and breathe. As I said, just set yourself that challenge. So, you know, it can be fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be serious on a cushion, you know, although, you know, 10 minutes meditation a morning will do amazing things. It's the science tells you it will.
Also, the other thing that you said, which we sort of touched on, and there are many beautiful sort of stories in your book, but when you do actually take away that extra noise, you actually just connect with the sounds of nature. And there is real joy in the senses, the feeling of the sun on your body, the sound of the lorikeets or a kookaburra, the feeling of the wind against your skin. So there is beautiful opportunities to feel joy and to feel, you know, take in the good, I think, as Rick Hansen calls it. If we just actually take those moments, as you say, and that in itself will just help the nervous system settle. And
absolutely. And you actually can almost, I describe it as feeling the senses unfurl, because what they're doing is that you're actually a human animal again. You're actually reaching out into your environment. And I should emphasize it's, you know, silence. When we talk about silence in this respect, we're talking about absence of man-made noise, not absence of nature, because natural noises do different things to the human body than man-made noise, again, because of evolution. Great quote from the acoustic ecologist Gordon Hempton, who taught me all about silence in nature, was, you know, silence isn't the absence of anything, it's the present. No, it isn't the absence of something, it's the presence of everything. Yeah, and sitting in nature particularly, and just taking in presence and being present to it, both physical and psychological benefits.
Christine, thank you. And it's so beautiful, this book. I loved it. I mean, we've talked a lot, there is a lot of facts, and you have done a beautiful journalistic job, but it's also just so beautifully written. It's a joy to read. So I really recommend that everybody buy it and listen, and well, not listen, but
buy
read.
both, by turning down the noise and glide.
I love this quote at the end. I'll just read it. First, it was from, is it Henri Nouwen? Henri, I might not be pronouncing.
Henri, I think it's Nguyen. I think I've heard it pronounced Nouwen as well, but I think it's Henri Nouwen. Yeah.
First, silence makes us pilgrims. Secondly, silence guards the fires within. Thirdly, science teaches us to speak. And
I love that.
so
It is the way I toyed with building the book around those three things, because silence doesn't have to silence us forever. If anything, and we live in an era where we need good, well-judged thought and speech. And that last one about it teaches us how to speak. I think it teaches you to speak with discernment and wisdom, rather than just immediately reactive outrage, you know, like, share, anger, you know, diss. And I think that's one of the really important things we need right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lisa.
Listeners and our audience. It's sort of so strange, isn't it? I can
Yeah,
see.
I know.
And also thanks to Better Read Than Dead
Yes.
for hosting us this evening. And yeah, buy this book. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Please come in and buy the book, and Glide as well. They're both such fantastic reads. I think both are on the shelf here at Better Read, so give us a visit. And thank you both so much. It's been such an important and fascinating conversation. So thank you both.
Thanks, Leona. Thanks to the bookshop.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye.